Alrighty then. Welcome to this week's book club conversation about Seth Godin's Purple Cow, which was a book that weirdly we have never read as much of a marketing classic as it is. We've read other Seth Godin books. We've read other books of the kind, but we have never read Purple Cow. So I thought we should add it to the list. So
Cool.
yeah. Any initial reactions? What do you think?
So, would you say it's a synopsis or a conglomeration of the approach by Blasier and Kennedy and gosh knows how many different people over the ages all rolled into one?
Well, I have to say, when I first read it, I thought it was a knockoff of Bill Glaser's Outrageous Marketing.
That's what I'm talking about.
Exactly. And, it's because at the time we were in the Glaser Kennedy insider circle. That was our kind of our marketing tribe at the moment. And so we were reading all the Glaser Kennedy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Glaser is kind of like the king of outrageous marketing, and I always thought that that was kind of his territory. But I just learned from ChatGPT that the original Purple Cow was written in 2003 and Outrageous Marketing was written in 2006. So I was wrong. It wasn't a knockoff. If anything, Bill Glaser knocked off Seth Godin. But, they were actually very different books. They had different examples and other things. It was kind of the same idea, though, that, yeah.
But wasn't there an outrageous, that's not what they called it, but marketing before Glacier hit that one?
Um, well, there was Al Reese and Jack Trout, the positioning, the battle for your mind, 1981. It talks
I don't know.
about,
I
yeah,
remember something way back. That's why I was asking.
right, exactly. So it was kind of I think it was kind of a knockoff. Well, every book we've ever read is a knockoff of some other set of books, to be honest, right?
Well, exactly. But, trying to go back far enough to figure out who really had the first idea, I couldn't figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know. It was probably P.T. Barnum or before, of course, Purple Cow. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because P.T. Barnum actually had somebody, this is actually a great story. He had somebody, when he had a circus in a new city or whatever, he would have somebody pick up a brick, walk around the building, set the brick down, go get another brick, walk around the building, set it down, and everybody would be, and he was instructed to not talk to anybody, not say anything or whatever, just to kind of draw a crowd around where all of the billboards and all of the other things and where the circus was going to come into town and everything else, so that there would already be this crowd in place by the time the circus rolled into town. So that was outrageous marketing. And I don't remember what was the time period of P.T. Barnum? That was way before any of this, right?
Yeah, that was 40s, maybe 50s at least.
No, no, no. No, 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 no. Much earlier than that.
Yeah.
Really?
I think so, in fact, I'm just looking it up on ChatGPT now. It's horrible, but 1869.
Really?
Yeah. So
Like,
um way earlier than Purple Cow. And I think
Yeah,
he way out Purple Cowed anything Purple Cow, to be honest. So he was like the original outrage with Marple.
yeah. The Greatest Showman is one of my wife's favorite, musical movies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's great. And the music in there is really good too. But I'm sure there was somebody before P.T. Barnum, but I don't know who it was. But so it's not a new idea. It's just that every book that we've ever read is a knockoff of something, and everything that we do is a knockoff of somebody else. So we just like to acknowledge where it came from when we can, right?
yeah, in fact, trivia, we were discussing at lunch today, where did the custom come from to wear a ring denoting you're married?
A wedding
Oh,
ring? Yeah.
yeah, it's 14,000 BC for crying out loud. That's been around a while. Anyway,
Ancient
trivia.
Egypt. Yeah, that was, I looked it up. So the things you find out from the internet,
But anyway, I just seem to remember something that anyway. So this outrageous thing was an approach by somebody before Kennedy. I just don't recall who.
right, exactly. So there was yeah, we can back up and do introductions since we're kind of here and we can always edit that back to the beginning and so forth. But I'm Paula Williams, ABCI. We help aviation companies sell more of their products and services.
I'm John Williams, also ABCI, and I play the part of the CFO and the cyber tech and whatever else is needed for.
And I'm Michael Duke. I am the CEO of DBT Aero. I am coming to you from Mexico, and hopefully the background noise isn't too bad.
That is outrageous. So that really fits right in. Great. Well, I hope you're having an amazing time in Mexico. Yeah, we were actually talking about Bill Glaser, who was kind of our mentor in outrageous marketing way back in the early 2000s when we were in the Glaser Kennedy Insider Circle, which was a marketing group. And so Outrageous Marketing, I think, was an excellent book in the same genre or the same vein as The Purple Cow. And I think The Purple Cow was actually a pretty good example or had some pretty good examples in it. You just mentioned to me, and I hadn't noticed this, Michael, before you pointed it out, that there was not much difference between the first and second editions. So I guess that's a word to the wise. If you read the old one, you probably don't need to read the new one, or at least, you can just get ChatGPT to summarize it for you.
Actually, it's not that there's much difference. There is exactly no difference, with the exception of an appendix. And as I was looking at the appendix, he actually states, I decided not to actually do an update. I think it's important to leave everything exactly the way it is. So instead of updating the text, I'm adding these testimonials at the end of the book. That's my update. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Because some of the claims he makes about companies that are doing some remarkable things, they turned out to be not very remarkable in hindsight. And in my opinion, he should have updated the book and either mark it as an update and the book is actually updated with correct current information, or state that it's not an update and simply say with added testimonials as an appendix, because that's all it was. It is exactly the same book.
And the crazy thing is, it worked. It got me to buy 30 copies and send them through the mail, So we killed a bunch of trees and wasted a bunch of people's time as a result of this trick being successful. And I guess that's my biggest problem with this genre, is that the hallmark, I think, of good marketing is trust, building trust over time and that kind of thing. And I think with some of these, just being outrageous for the sake of being outrageous, it runs the risk of impacting the level of trust that you have with your customers. So, I'm going to think twice before I buy another updated Seth Godin book, or add it to the book club. There are some authors that every time they come out with a book, it automatically gets added to next year's list because I know it's going to be amazing. But I'm not going to do that with Seth Godin because he impeded my trust in his brand by doing something outrageous, or maybe it wasn't that outrageous, but it was, what would you call it?
Lazy.
Okay. Yeah.
It was lazy from my I'm not saying that the book itself is bad, but I felt deceived that it was an update and I'm expecting an update, and I'm reading through the book again, because I read it years ago, and it's like, all of these examples are old. What in the world's going on? And then I finally get to the appendix, reading the thing all the way through, and there's a little statement in there. I decided not to actually update. I'm just adding an appendix because I want to keep everything the way it was. Well, then don't mark it as an update. Mark it as, with an expanded testimonial. Fine. but it's not an update. And there were no new concepts. I'm expecting from an update new concepts, new ideas. What have you learned in the last 30 years since the book came out?
Yeah.
And there were no new learnings whatsoever.
Mhm.
And then frankly, in going back through the book, I don't remember when it was first published, but I'm just saying 30 years. It's
Yeah.
probably close to that. It could be 40 years later, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Having, going back through the book now and looking at it, I'm a highlighter, and so you look at the books that I really enjoy, and there's highlight everywhere, and there's notes in the margins, and I'll reference other pages in the book back and forth to link the concepts. There is almost nothing highlighted or underlined or referenced in this copy.
Wow.
It is old. It is dated. The information was marvelous at the time. And it's old and dated. Everybody understands the concept by now. And there was just not a lot of really new, interesting information. There's a few things that's like, oh yeah, this is good to remember. I should mark this. But in terms of really looking for moving marketing forward,
Mhm.
I didn't see it.
Okay. That's fair. And you and John both have the ability to almost have, I would say, almost a photographic memory of a book. Once you read it, you remember certain things on certain pages, which just makes me feel crazy. But I tend to get amnesia in 30 years and, go back to the book and go, that's an interesting idea because I'm coming back to it with a different mind than I had 30 years ago. So there are a few books that I read once every 10 years. Because I'm not like you.
Well, and I think I made
Yeah.
a less harsh but similar comment about oh come on, start with why.
Yeah. Start with
I
why.
really like Start with Why. I still like Start with Why today, but that's because it's original and he's taken the concept and he's written additional books that leverage the concept, but he hasn't gone back and said, oh, let me update and revise this, and I'm expecting new content.
Yeah.
The content in Start with Why is relevant. It's timeless.
Mhm.
And I think the concept of a purple cow, something remarkable, is also timeless.
Yeah.
However, I think that message has gotten out, and I'm looking for how does it apply today? And when you're talking about examples that are, I think a lot of people would look at the examples and say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because the examples are that old.
Yeah.
And as a result, they don't connect. And
Right.
that's part of the problem.
And they weren't really that revolutionary as they were, maybe in popular culture at the time. One that I liked a lot better was The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point.
Yep.
But I kind of think that Malcolm Gladwell is he's less lazy, I guess, to use your earlier statement. Malcolm Gladwell does a lot of research and he's very precise about the way he writes. And I like that a lot better. I think his books are a little bit more usable. And, so The Tipping Point was about being outrageous, but it was also very specific and very cool in that way because it was more researched, I guess, better examples, more applicable examples, and things like that. So, and that's just partly I don't know, maybe a aesthetic point of view. I like Malcolm Gladwell's way of speaking better, but or way of writing better.
Yeah, I'll kind of comment on that style as well. I think what I'm hearing you say is that you're looking for a better organization and structure to the book. And that's something that I think is typical of Seth Godin's books, which is a real stream of consciousness, I'll call it, and a real lack of organization and analytics. And so it's like he's just putting in, and there are no where are the chapters in the book? I didn't, there are none.
William Faulkner of marketing writers, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a stream of consciousness,
Yeah.
and some of it makes sense, and some of it's like, where's the organization? I'm expecting each chapter to have kind of a thesis, and then you get the information, the analytics, the argument that goes with that thesis, and you're persuading people to your point of view. And instead, the whole book seemed to be a stream of consciousness, and some of it is like, okay, good point. I should remember this. I need to apply this more often. But a lot of it is just a stream of consciousness. It's like, yeah, so that's not relevant anymore, or somebody else has really done a better job of explaining that and making it relevant. And so the stream of consciousness doesn't connect with me the way it did when it was first written.
Right. Exactly. I think that kind of brings up, my biggest problem with this book. And we just had KRR join us. If you want to introduce yourself, feel free, or if you want to jump in, feel free to do that. We're just discussing Seth Godin's Purple Cow.
Hi, it's Kelly Rittenhouse. Sorry, I'm having some trouble. I'm here. Thank you. And technology this morning or today is fighting me.
Oh, well, good
Thanks.
to see you. I'm happy you're here. But yeah, anyway, feel free to chime in anytime. But I think my biggest problem with this culture, I guess, the purple cow culture that kind of started around the early 2000s, was also characterized by Elon Musk's move fast and break things. It's almost a lazy, do outrageous things for the sake of being outrageous. And so, he was talking about like the shatterproof windows in his Cybertruck, and then they shattered on stage at his demo. It's just, they roll things out too fast for the sake of being the first, or being ridiculous, or being dramatic, or whatever. And especially in the aviation industry, we are expected to have a structure and to have standards and to have all of these things. And so maybe I'm just old and grumpy, but I do think that there is something about the outrageous culture that doesn't work in our industry.
Well, Microsoft did the same thing. They put out software that had bugs in it, and they expected everybody to debug it for them. And they did.
Before that,
Yeah.
It's perfection, right?
Well, and it's a different approach. I mean, the whole fail fast mentality comes from software, and that makes sense. Okay, you get a couple of guys, you put them in a basement, for a couple of weeks or a month, and you have them, create some kind of a little demo, an MVP. Does it work? Maybe the software works, maybe the software doesn't. Maybe the windows shatter, maybe the windows don't. But the idea is that you can bring that MVP out in front of customers and test it.
Yeah.
Is it remarkable to the customers? Do they get it? Do they, is it easy to use? Is it hard to use? What do we need to do to fix it? And so, I understand it from a software mentality. From a hardware mentality, it's really hard to come up with a new type of glass and make it shatterproof. I mean, my dad worked at Corning, and they spent years figuring out, how do you make Corel? How do you make a plate that's very hard to break? And they figured it out, but it took a team of them many, many years and millions of dollars to come up with an MVP. Yeah. And then, as it turns out, it's not just the glass composition. It turns out it's also a manufacturing process. So not only do you have to come up with a concept of how to make difficult to break glass, but you have to come up with a way to make it, manufacture it, and you have to come up with the right composition to actually create those particular that structure in the actual product. And that takes years. It's not something you can put people in a room for a couple of weeks and say, hey, go find something and let's try it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
In front of millions of people. Right? Yeah. And that makes sense, because Elon Musk was a software guy, before he got into hardware. And so, he was applying software principles to hardware. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons that we have a book club, because for the aviation industry, you can take the latest and greatest sales and marketing ideas. Some of them work great, but there's a lot of caveats you have to apply, I think, to our industry, because you can't just be a software. And there are some examples of software companies in the aviation industry that don't do very well because they're applying their principles to a very different culture than what they're used to.
Yep.
Now, one of the things he said, which I think applies very well to hardware, is that you should be designing in remarkability at the beginning. It's not something that you market, and yet that's what he did with his updated and revised. And I was like, no. So it's not something that you do after the fact. It's something you do in the development. It should be baked into the product. The product itself should be remarkable, not just the marketing of the product is remarkable.
Right.
And I think he broke his own rule. He marketed that his book is remarkable by updating it when he really didn't update it. So it needs to be baked in. He should have updated the book.
Yeah, maybe that's the remarkable part, is that he did a non-updated update. It wasn't remarkable in a good way, but it was remarkably bad,
Yeah, I mean, he broke his own rule, and I think the rule makes sense. We need to be looking not just in software, but in hardware as well. What is it that we can do? And I've talked about hardware, but there's, you have lots of clients that it's all about service. And that's great. What is it that they're doing in their service, the services they're offering, that it's not just how you promote the service remarkably, but they're fundamentally doing remarkable service. And that's something then for people to talk about and promote.
Absolutely. Right. Did you want to talk about the hardware side of it? Michael, you're probably the best person that I know that could do that.
I'm happy to take the discussion wherever you want. I thought that the list of questions that you had in announcing the book club are excellent questions, and those are things that people ought to think about as they develop a product or service. And there's certainly things that can be talked about with regards to the book. I'm not sure that the book necessarily answers all of those, but I think it's a great set of questions.
Oh, I'm glad you like them. Yeah. And I kind of throw those out there, and then I don't necessarily use them unless somebody wants to. But, you're certainly welcome to take the conversation anywhere you would like as well. In fact, I don't even have my questions up in front of me because the strangest thing, these conversations go kind of off the cuff and stream of consciousness, which is what we were talking about, not liking about the book. But the spontaneity sometimes is a wonderful thing as well.
Well, if you're trying to convey information or you're trying to persuade someone, you probably should have organized your thoughts, and then you adapt as necessary, a stream of consciousness. But there should be some initial organization to how are you going to convince people that you're right.
Right.
Or that they need to at least consider your point of view. As far as discussing something, I think that's one of the wonders of spontaneity is we play off each other, and that's really where the whole concept of the internet came about, was the ability for people to actually annotate something else. So the original idea behind the web was you put up a web page and I read it and say, oh, I want to annotate and link what you wrote to something I'm writing. And so I'm annotating your content and linking it to something else. So you're now getting everybody's input, that kind of random stream of consciousness that people are bouncing around. And that part of the web never happened because of ownership rights. You're the only one that can that can modify, the content you put up on the web. But the original concept was other people would be able to edit the content, link to your content, and then put up additional information, which continues to grow the knowledge base.
Yeah, like the Wikipedia model.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to hear you talk about your purple cow, which is the only hardware purple cow that I know of that is purely that way. And Kelly, I'd love to hear you talk about service from that perspective, because you're probably the best person I know of to talk about that. But I don't know if either of you have any thoughts along those lines, but those would be the questions that I'd love to ask you guys.
So I actually will challenge the notion of a purple cow always being a good thing.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Okay.
When I go to talk to people about our purple cow, not everybody gets it.
Yeah.
And so, I've used the example of the first time I heard of a Walkman. This is the late 70s, right around 1980, 79, 80. And I'm told that, there's somebody has a cassette player, and I'm like, well, why didn't you bring it with you? And he's like, well, and you said it's really small. I've never seen one that small before. And so he starts telling me about it, and I'm like, he's like, well, it's this big, and you kind of, it's just barely the size of a cassette player. I'm like, well, they can't have a very big speaker in it. And he looks at me like I'm an idiot. And he said, well, there is no speaker in it. I said, well, then how do you listen to anything? I mean, what good is a cassette player if you can't play your music and hear it?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, he looks at me like I'm an idiot, and he said, you use headphones. And I'm like, why would you use headphones? You take the cassette player and you pop a cassette in and you blast it so that you and your friends can all hear it and you enjoy the music when you go to the beach or you're in the car or whatever. And he's like, no, it's for personal listening. I'm like, I don't get it. And he finally shows it to me, plugs in some headphones, and it's like, oh, I can have it as loud as I want. I can go anywhere I want, and no one hears my music except me. But even though you had transistor radios and you could put in, a little earphone, that's not how you used them.
No,
it was always a speaker so that you could share the music with other people. And here is a device that was designed under a different metaphor.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's like, I couldn't really grasp the value of a Walkman until I actually experienced it. And I think the same thing is true with the beginning of smartphones. Why do I need a smartphone? I can talk and text. What else do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
My Motorola flip phone works just fine and is really small. It's smaller than your smartphone. Well, yeah, but you can't check your bank account and you can't put music on it, and you can't look at the daily stock chart or whatever it is you want to do. And they're like, why would I want to do that? Well, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.
And until you actually experience it, you say, oh, this is a computer. Yeah. It's just really small. I can carry a computer in my pocket. I never thought about that.
Imagine how smart you could be if you have the whole web at your fingertips,
That's right.
Grandparents would have gone bananas.
And that's what I face when I try to share what we're doing, is a lot of people are like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean you're more efficient? How could you be bigger and faster? I mean, that doesn't work. Either you're a bigger plane, and you're faster and you burn more fuel and you're noisier, or you're a smaller plane and you're more efficient and you don't burn as much fuel. But it's like, how can you do both?
It's like, everybody's mindset is still a 172 or an airline ticket,
Yep, that's
it. Things.
And so it's hard to get people to understand the purple cow because they've never experienced it.
Right. Or your cow is even more purple. It's so ultraviolet, nobody has ever seen it yet. It's off the visible scale of purpleness.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange. So it's hard to simplify and have people understand what it is because it breaks the metaphors of what they're used to. And I know that that's kind of what Seth was going after is you need to have something that people have never seen so that they will remark on it and that it gets attention. The problem is they also have to understand it's a cow.
Yes.
It just happens to be purple, but it still produces regular milk. It does all the things a regular cow does. And if it was like, okay, it's a purple cow, but does it make purple milk? You know, it comes out as cottage cheese. It's like, I don't get it.
How is it relevant to my life? Right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be too different. And I think sometimes, we're breaking the mold too much.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it's hard for people to grasp that things are different. I say if we scaled our aircraft to the same size as a Phenom 300, we would be 6 feet 6 inches in the cabin, whereas a Phenom 300 is 4'11" by 5'1".
Yeah.
And they're like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Like, really? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like, but it does.
The physics,
yes.
What people know.
And that's it. We have to actually go through and explain to them and show how it is possible, but it breaks everything that they think is possible. It's like seeing a UFO and it's like, but they're not real. Well, but this one is.
Is, right. Exactly. Kelly, I don't know if you have any thoughts or examples on purple cows in the service end of aviation. I know that's kind of your area of expertise, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that if you'd like to share.
Well, thanks. I just find this discussion really interesting, and I actually have enjoyed Seth's writing over the years, and I'd read this book a long time ago, and then having some distance from it, and like you guys were saying, it is. I looked at it really very differently this time, and I think I've liked him because for me, he was someone that stream of consciousness thinking I could follow along because I think I think that way sometimes, or I try to see a through line in something, but that's not for everyone. And so this time I felt like, oh, this really isn't for everyone. And this is one of the challenges. And it's a challenge for me as I talk to people about us. We are a flight department. I manage aircraft and people and provide a service. When I'm hiring people and I'm talking to them, I say we're a customer service provider. Our tool happens to be an airplane. Yeah. And there are sometimes I feel that I can get ahead of my team and have them not connect. What, you don't want me to fly? What is the important thing? Like, you still have to have this framework because, of course, all of the technical skills and the technical aspects of what it is we're providing are critical. The purple cow for me is the way in which we do it, the way in which we deliver on our promises, or we surprise and delight our customers and we try to think ahead of them. But that doesn't always mix well with our sort of the way we're wired, right? Because we're in a box and we've got checklists and do you know what I had to do to get you from here to there? And the customer's experience is they appreciate it, but they don't want to know about it. That's not why they hired us. They want it to be a seamless experience. So I find myself really appreciating some of the concepts that Seth talks about, and in some of his other work, I liked Linchpin. I liked I've listened to some of his podcasts and different things, but for it to be a really productive use of his material, it's harder now as I look at it, and maybe I'm a little more battle worn, in my role, and I can see why people just look at me like I don't. So do you want us to take the catering out, or should we pick this, you know, what is they're looking for from me? Can you please give me the checklist and the concrete example? So
Exactly.
that's sort of how it resonated with me.
That's excellent. I love that feedback. Sometimes that's the best way to start where people are and then take them where you want them to go. And I'm really happy that that style worked for you. Everybody's got a different, I guess, way of learning and a way of applying information. So that's great. But yeah, I mean, he's still hiring pilots. They have to meet all the criteria. They still have to fly the plane. And they still have to do the checklists and all that stuff, but you want them to think beyond that into anticipating the needs of the client and everything else. And that's just so alien, I think, to the thinking of a lot of folks.
One of the things we really like to talk about in our briefings, we do a pre-brief on flights, and I include everyone on the team. We come around a table and we walk through and talk through things. And sometimes you can also get in a bit of a rut. And so my question is normally, what's different about today?
Yeah.
I stop everyone and I ask them. And it's funny, some people, it can be hypothetically what's different about today, or it can be really practically what is different about today. And I might have a specific thought in mind and I'll listen for it or see, what the team comes up with. But something like that to make you look for opportunities, look for a difference, look for potential pitfalls and hazards. What is different about today as we just get into our routines? And so I like to use some of that thinking in that manner as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about, the client appreciates what we do, but he doesn't want to know all the details. Those scenes in the James Bond movies where, Q is saying, well, I did this and I did this and I did this, and then I had to make this smaller and I had to do this and make this miniaturized and everything else. And here's this fabulous car, and James Bond doesn't care. He just wants to get in the car and drive it. And, that's kind of how our customers are as well. They just want to get in the car and drive it. They don't care what all is in it until they want X, Y, or Z feature, and they want the oil slick and the smoke screen and the missiles shooting out the front or whatever. It's kind of a fun analogy. Right.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, it's so funny. I remember when we first got into the aviation industry, walking through NBAA for the very first time. And, this was a long time ago. And I remember just the sea of navy blue suits thinking, we really need to shake up this world. We really need to introduce them to non-traditional marketing. We need to da 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 da. And of course, I was younger then. And I had all these crazy ideas, and so reading something like The Purple Cow is just like, yes, we need to do all this crazy stuff. But having lived in this world, with people who are checklist driven and for good reason, and, the safety culture, the risk mitigation, all of that stuff becomes part of the character of the people that we're working with. So it's kind of gotten into my blood as well. So I'm kind of tempered my purple cowness or my tipping pointness or my move fast and break thingsness, I guess, over time, if that makes sense. That sounds like you have a similar experience with that, Carrie.
Yes, I would agree with that as well. And I think that it's been helpful to learn that not everyone thinks the way I do, thankfully, right? And to appreciate the different lenses. And yeah, so that's good. It was fun like I said, it was fun to reread this with a little retrospect. And yes, and I can see how this would be very annoying to some of my other colleagues. And no.
Right. And I love the fact that you include everybody in the briefings, and I'm sure some of them probably feel like they don't need to do this, but it's so important to have everybody on the same page, before a mission. I love that you do that. And the fact that you've got people that think differently in the same room, kind of forced to look at the same slide on the screen, or, however you do that, you're actually focusing their attention on a topic in a time and space, that brings everybody's attention into the room, even if they think differently. And that's so valuable.
And I think that's actually one of the keys to finding remarkableness in a company, is to have all those different insights. My favorite way of putting it is, we are smarter than me. And that happened just, this week with you and Ben. Yeah. Collaborating on an idea that I would have just completely passed over, and yet he saw it differently. And the two of you collaborating came up with something I think that'll be very extraordinary. And yet my mind went a completely different direction. So it's really important to have lots of different viewpoints, to get all those people together as you develop your products, your services. You're looking for remarkableness in your company. You need those multiple perspectives, different viewpoints, different experiences, cultures. All of those things work together to create remarkableness. And a purple cow. What is a purple cow to one person may not be to somebody else, and that's okay. You pick your battles, and you get the right people in the room, and let them take the product that goes to a different segment.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got that same challenge with my team. I need to kind of suspend my disbelief for a minute and not instantly judge ideas that other people bring up, because it's my company, darn it. And, they bring up ideas and I think, well, that will never work. But, I have to suspend my disbelief and go, you know what, that might be the coolest thing that's happened to us in months. If I take a minute to step back and, consider it from other angles and things like that. So I think a lot of purple cows get killed before they ever see the light of day. Which is too bad. We need to have a culture that tolerates some purpleness in our cows.
Yep.
All right. So let's just kind of go around maybe famous last words and things like that, and then take a quick break, and then we'll be back for group office hours and see where we go next. So what do you think? 1 out of 10? Well, actually, if you want to rate both books, the old one and the new one, I would say the old one I'd give an 8, and only because I liked The Tipping Point better and I liked Outrageous Marketing better. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10 for the old book, and maybe a 2, well, less than a 2, maybe a 0.5 for the new book, because it was a outrageous idea.
I'm going to bypass rating it all because
Okay.
I seem to read or know something like I've done it before, but it wasn't the original book of his. And so it just seemed old.
Okay. So you're not even going to bother to rate it?
Nope.
Okay.
So I think at the time, it was very impactful. It had a lot of impact. And because of that, at the time that it was first released, it was certainly, an 8+.
Okay.
Now, we had talked about at the beginning, remarkableness wasn't new. It was just something that hadn't really been, reduced to a book. Yeah. And so since that time, there's been a lot of things that have talked about how to be remarkable, tipping point, other things. And as a result, with no new content, it would be one of the last books I would suggest people to read, unless they've never read something in the genre. If you've never read something in the genre, it has great information. It'll be very valuable, but it was much more valuable when the examples and the stories, the case studies were all current and relevant. Today, I think it's dated, but there's still good information in there. I just think it's been superseded by other books that have, used it as a stepping stool and upped the game.
Totally agree. It's evolved since then, or the field, the idea has evolved since then.
Yes, and I would agree with that completely. I thought early on, as I said, it was a 8+. I agree that it was very thought provoking. Really enjoyed it. Now, and I think it's good as a retrospect, but I wouldn't sell it as a must. There are certainly others that have built off of his original concept and for discussion. So, but I'm glad that to experience it in both. I think that's also a lesson as well, right? That was good for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because sometimes in this book club we discuss a terrible book, and we come up with great ideas out of the discussion anyway, because we discuss what are better examples of the same principle. I don't know if who of you has a recommendation for maybe a book for next year that would be more current, more cool, more better.
I don't, but I try to find the silver lining in things. What is the learning regardless? And I think there is an interesting learning that it was sold as an update without an actual update. And how often do we do that with our products and services? We sell it as an update by simply putting it in new packaging when it isn't really updated at all. And I think that's a mistake. And that's exactly what happened here. So I think there is a real learning, and that is if you're, you need to keep pushing the envelope. And he talks about that.
Yeah.
You can't sit on your laurels, and he sat on his laurels. We can't sit on our laurels either. We have to keep reinventing and providing newer, better, faster, cheaper, whatever, adjective you want. But we need to keep moving forward and not sit on our laurels.
Right. He talks about sustaining remarkability, but he didn't sustain the remarkability. So yeah, that's one of his principles that he straight up threw out. So, all right. Great. Any other famous last words, or should we wrap it up then?
No.
All right.
It's a great book in the annals of marketing. It's just a little dated.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate you being here. And we'll just go around the room one more time. I'm Paula Williams, ABCI. We help aviation companies sell more of their products and services.
John Williams, ABCI, and I work for her in the background.
And I force you to come to book clubs and read all these books.
And I'm Michael Duke, CEO of DBT Aero. We're shaping the future of aviation.
Absolutely. The purple cow in hardware that I'm aware of at the moment. So.
Yep.
And I'm Kelly Rittenhouse, and I am looking for creative ways to continue to serve in this great industry, aviation. Thanks.
And the inventor of purple cows in service. So that's great. Well, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next week. Our book for next time is They Ask, You Answer. Marcus Sheridan, which I think is actually one of my favorite books in marketing that I have ever read. So I think that is going to be a really good one. And we've done other Marcus Sheridan books, but never done that one. So it's a good year for this. Great. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys. Ciao.